Clock, and I'm calling to order the August 23rd, 2021 Education Operations Committee meeting. I'd like to welcome and thank everyone for being here for this evening, and with that, we'll begin. Agenda item 2, I am seeking a motion to approve the minutes from the last Education Operations Committee meeting held on June 28th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or corrections? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Item 3, public and student comment. We welcome and recognize the community today, students and speakers who wish to make public comments. I would also like to remind all speakers to do 3 things. 1, state your name. As you come up to the table, you can sit down and state your name, state your address, and then speak directly to the board with your thoughts and ideas, and we greatly appreciate that. So, thank you. If I could have a list, please. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Okay, so that fits within the 30 minutes of 3. All right, we have 10 speakers today. First individual would be Roger Jolly.
My name is Roger Jolly. My address is 124 Velma Lane in Hatley. Even though I don't live in the Wausau School District, I'm here tonight on behalf of my 4-year-old granddaughter who's entering Wausau school system this year. I think it's valuable to look at the rationale some of our neighboring school districts have used in deciding to require masks in all their schools. The Stevens Point superintendent said, "Our primary responsibility to our students and to this community is to maintain mitigation strategies that preserve safe, face-to-face educational opportunities. At this time, masks are being recommended by the CDC and DHS and the County Health Department and the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. We believe that keeping this mitigation tactic in place provides the best chance of maintaining in-person learning." The Marshfield School Superintendent said, "Safety played the biggest factor in our decision. Our primary goal and objective with our back-to-school plan is to keep students safe and physically present in school for as much in-person learning as possible. Starting the school year with a mask requirement is the most effective mitigation tool we have available to help us meet our goal of providing as safe a learning environment as possible for students and staff." The Wausau School Board, on the other hand, has apparently decided to be reactive instead of proactive. Instead of requiring masking, the most effective mitigation tool available, the board has decided to first put the children at risk, and then after enough children get sick or worse, they might revisit it. I don't feel the administration or the board is taking the Delta variant seriously enough. At the last board meeting, someone said masking is a choice parents should make, not the school. That's not true if that choice endangers the health and lives of other children. It's the children whose parents are following all the safety recommendations that need to be protected. Someone said masking is a community issue. It's because there are still some COVID deniers and anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers in the community that it's even more important for the schools to follow the recommendation of the medical and science experts. With all due respect, none of you have any formal medical or science training or expertise. That being said, I cannot understand why all but 2 people on the board have decided to ignore the recommendations of the very people who do have the necessary education and expertise. There's not one logical, medical, or science-based reason to not require masks in school. Masks work, but only if every child wears one. Masking can help to ensure continued in-person learning. Masking is safe. While millions have died from COVID, no one has ever died from wearing a mask.
Mr. Jolly. Okay. There's 3 minutes.
Just
Thank
one
you.
last thing, if I
No,
may.
we've got to hold to
Please
10.
reconsider your decision before it's too late. I've asked this on behalf of my precious little granddaughter.
Next person, Deborah Cron.
Deborah Cron, 12118 Blackbeard Lane, Tampa, Florida. I have 3 grandchildren in the Wausau School District. I come from Tampa right now because to let you know what the school district did, Hillsborough County had over 5,200 kids that caught COVID within 6 days' time, so they made it mandatory masks. 5,200. We have kids laying on a floor in an urgent care in a walk-in clinic because there's no more hospital beds. I have 3 grandchildren. 1 was able to get vaccinated because he's 13. 2 are under the age of 12. 1 is severely autistic. He goes to South Mountain School. He will not wear a mask. He's scared of a mask. South Mountain is the home to disabled kids. These children will not wear a mask. It scares them. To even think about opening schools for children under 12 right now without a mask, it's just ludicrous. I don't think you guys really know how bad this is. Florida, it's not mandatory to wear a mask, but there is not a place you go to that somebody doesn't have a mask on. Children are not having a problem putting a mask on. It's the adults having a problem putting a mask on. Every child has no problem wearing one. And you know what? It's working. It's everybody's responsibility right now. It's everybody's. And not to clean it, and you don't know how devastating this is to open up a school without mask mandate. It's just, everybody recommends it. So why is Wausau not? I pull into this state, and I travel Florida to Wisconsin every month and a half. I pull into the state, and it's the only state that is in such denial of this COVID. I'm looking right now. You guys are not even 6 feet apart. Nobody's got a mask on over here. Do you think that you're immune to it because you're in Wisconsin? Or you live out in the country? I mean, you do not know how bad this is. My 3rd grandchild has respiratory problems. He cannot attend school. Last year, he wasn't even able to go to school except for 1 hour a day because of COVID. He has regressed so much. He's gone back about 3 years' time. He's severely autistic. He cannot do virtual. The other 2 now are stuck doing virtual another year. If a parent has a problem with wearing a mask, they should be doing virtual at home. If they don't want a vaccination, fine. That's their right. Then stay home. Stay home and do the virtual so our kids can be safe and go to school. We're the ones being punished for doing the right thing. I mean, it's ludicrous to even think anything else. You do the right thing. We all have to keep it clean. We all need a mask on. I don't understand if you really think that you're not going to get it, because I see firsthand
Thank you, Ms. Cron.
what it does.
Thank you. Next.
Jane Roosh, 4522 Forest Valley Road, Wausau. I requested 3 things for this meeting. Each request was denied. I, of course, am hoping with all my heart that these things don't get worse and that no one gets ill, but we have a duty to plan for the worst. First, I requested a change of venue as COVID numbers continue to grow, not only to protect not just my family, my mother, who is health compromised, lives with me, but the staff, the public, and my fellow board members. It costs nothing, but it was denied. Second, I requested a presentation about the virus and vaccines by local experts, something that happens before the board votes on any policy. It didn't happen this time, but we also have a duty to educate the public and let them see what information we base our votes on. We still need to make these presentations to keep up on the pandemic. We should have updates at every regular meeting of the board. Last year we had them almost every board meeting. Third, I asked the board to discuss and set the criteria that would move the district to mandate masks or return to virtual education. Not only is the district tasked with educating our students, but keeping them safe as well. We owe it to our staff and families to let them know what would change their plans. They need to know what numbers must exist before the board acts. Is it a full ICU? A certain number of sick staff or students? Does there have to be deaths? If so, how many? If no modifications are going to be made no matter what happens, the district families and staff deserve to know that as well. This board is being derelict in its duties. The only way to set the criteria before school starts now is to have a special meeting. And if you're relying on a retired, unlicensed anesthesiologist for information or studies that constantly refer to experts but never name or cite studies, then chances are they're just junk science. And today, we had a good outcome come from the FDA. They have approved the vaccination for 16 and above, so it's no longer considered experimental, and I know that was a reason that many people held back from getting them. So now that, hopefully these people will go and get vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roosh. Next person, Bruce Frau. Rao, excuse me.
Rao.
I saw that G as an F, I apologize.
It's my terrible handwriting. I'm Bruce Grau, 1115 North 10th Street. It was a deadly virus transmitted through aerosolized droplets that killed 500 million people yearly worldwide. By 1977, the smallpox virus became the first infectious disease to be wiped out by intentional human activity with mass vaccinations. I remember how this came about when I was growing up. I remember standing in a long line outside my elementary school with my parents and my neighbors. The line stretched all the way down the block. I remember receiving a puncture from a 2-pronged needle in my arm. The scar is still there. We listened to the science. We acknowledged the risk, and we came together to make our community a healthier place for all. Our school served as a major player in the life and health of our community, supporting the students and their working parents. People were considerate of others. The Bible was taught in church. The school board was viewed in a positive light because it prioritized the concerns of the parents and the teachers. School board candidates weren't bought. Fast forward to another deadly pandemic. 4.5 million people dead in the last year. 9 times the rate among poor and non-white people. Inconsistent mitigation and vaccination have mutated COVID into an increasingly contagious variant, with the latest affecting healthier and younger people, hospitalizing and killing those who are not vaccinated. When we ask to return to common sense and consider proven measures to support our community, the response of the school board is silence. Discussion of our safety is replaced on the agenda by proposals to astroturf and dome an athletic field to compete with a nearby district for statewide sport venue. When asked to support the development of vaccination clinics within community schools for the convenience of working parents and neighbors, a time-tested success, the response is silence. When asked how many students would have to get sick, parents' jobs lost, or a child's life taken before the board reconsiders their mask policy, the response is again silence. The silence of your position is deafening. 1 hospitalization, 1 job loss, and 1 child's death is tolerable to you, and far less important than securing corporate sponsorship of a high school sporting event. Is this the best a $30,000 can buy? Make American schools great again. Do we have to run through the entire alphabet of variants before we come to our senses? Doesn't every life matter? We've proven we can do so much better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rao. Next would be Amy Kurth. No. Sandra Flanagan.
I'm Sandy Flanagan, 568 North 43rd Avenue here in Wausau. I'm a retired Wausau School District classroom teacher, Statine, and a grandparent with children here in the Wausau District. There have been extremely difficult times, and I agree with so much that has been said just before me. There's been a range of information, and so much of it's been very divisive. I've spoken with Karen, I've spoken with Cassie Peck, and also with Angie Lloyd, and I thank them for listening to my concerns and for their follow-up. As the Wausau School District mission up there states, it's to advance student learning, achievement, and success. And it strives to be a desirable district for people so that they want to be here and stay in this district. I realize there's a genuine concern because there's money involved in that, all right, and funding. With these priorities in mind, I too would like to address this masking situation. The CDC recommends universal indoor masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors to K-12 schools, regardless of vaccination status. Pure and simple. In Dr. Hilt's letter here in August, you stated that the Wausau School District continues to be dedicated to safe, high-quality educational experience for everyone's students. Well, that letter also refers to the August 9th board meeting where members reaffirmed students attend the 5 days per week. I get that. And masks will be optional. Why isn't the Wausau School District following CDC guidelines? To my way of thinking, there are 4 options. You require a mask, you recommend it, it's optional, or no mask. Now, last week it became apparent to me that even though the CDC recommended the masks, the Wausau School District went optional. Now, last week I found out that in the Elmbrook School District in Brookfield, Wisconsin, which is considered number 1 as far as the schools in the state, they went with what I think is a win-win situation. They went to a return to learn plan where parents were given a choice. You could choose if your child would be in a mask required room or a mask recommended room or virtual. To me, this is a win-win plan, and I would strongly recommend you reviewing your plan
Thank you.
and
Ms. Flanagan.
deciding to
Thank
again
you.
address the needs and safety of children.
Okay, next would be Mary Hefs.
Hafes.
Hafes. I knew it was one way or the other, I chose the wrong.
Well, you gotta remember your German. O-E is A.
I agree.
Mary Hafes, 214 South Fourth Avenue, Abbotsford, Wisconsin. First, I want to say that I have a petition here. Currently, it had, at time of printing, there was 871 signatures. As 5 o'clock, there was 878. It is still is gaining interest. And I am asking that it be entered into the public record and pasted on the district website with the written public comments. First, I'm going to say I'm a grandma. I raised my kids in Wausau. My grandkids are here. My grandson had COVID. He was sick. He is a student in your district. He had COVID before vaccinations were offered to everyone in the public. My daughter is immunocompromised. She works in medical. She's a nursing student currently, and she is out there to save lives. That is everybody's job, is to save lives and protect the health of them. My grandson's dad was very sick with COVID. They quarantined together. My grandson was worried his dad was going to die. My daughter, having worked for Aspirus, she was vaccinated. She didn't get it. Kids are scared. You're the adults making decisions for the children. The children are your customers. The children are what count. Ask the children how they feel. Has anybody asked the kids? And Dr. Nikolai, I'm going to address you. You belong to a prestigious society. You are a medical doctor.
Please.
Am I correct?
Please connect with everybody, not just one person.
Okay, but he is. And I am asking him as a member of this board to stand up for what medical doctors are saying. But I'm going to make one last comment. Children under the age of 12 don't have the option to get vaccinated. If any of you are vaccinated, you have that option to protect yourself. The only thing that can protect these kids right now are masks. And if you lose a child on your watch, it will not be forgotten. And who can I give this to enter?
To Cassie, please. Thank you. Next person, Nora Brown.
Hi, I'm Nora Brown, 917 Ethel Street, Wausau. My impression so far, which is supported by tonight's agenda, is that this board is out of touch with the priorities of its constituents. I've compiled a list of topics from other district parents, staff, and community members that they want to see the board prioritize. COVID-19 precautions was far and away the #1 topic and should clearly be at the top of the list right now, but other people have spoken to that. So I'll just say that there are organizations whose job it is to provide guidance on how best to keep our children safe and healthy in this situation, and we need to follow that guidance. And as far as alternative options, we need to be honest about them. My husband and I have 5 children, 4 of whom are currently in school. They're enrolled in the WAVE program, and we're glad to have that option. But it only works for us because Jason and I work opposite hours. I have a very flexible job, and our kids are all high-achieving students who are able to stay motivated and self-disciplined, mostly. This is clearly not the case for most families, though, and to imply that this is a realistic option for everyone is offensive and out of touch. Other topics that were given include more life skills education, better preparing students for life after high school, project-based learning opportunities, more foreign language options and foreign languages offered earlier, support services for struggling students, more programming for gifted and talented students, better meeting the needs of children who achieve in the 25th to 75th percentile range. And please note that these 3 topics do add up to a need to prioritize appropriate programming for all of our students, as well as the need to equip and empower staff. Class sizes is a big one. We need to revisit the appropriate class size limits, as 29 students to 1 teacher in any elementary classroom is not conducive to the standards of learning that our district strives for. But in the short term, we need to look at class sizes across the district and make adjustments to help balance things. And that brings me to another topic. The imbalance in enrollment numbers between schools is obvious and clearly needs to be addressed. I understand that some attempts have been made to adjust boundaries, and I actually participated in some of these attempts, but we need to make bigger changes. The disparities between our middle and high schools continue to grow and are creating bigger issues as they do. Not only are we providing less equitable opportunities for our students, but we're advancing a system where there's a serious lack of alignment between the school board, schools, parents, and the community. Too many people are looking at what best serves their own interests rather than how we serve our district as a whole, and the board is probably the worst example of this. This is not the way to lead. I sincerely hope that the community and staff engagement process that you'll be discussing this evening is a step in the right direction on this note, but it will take serious change on the board level as well. Because the very next item after that on the agenda is the board proposing to privately fund a project of your own choosing over which you will have unilateral control. This is exactly the lack of alignment that we're talking about. Not to mention the ethical issues inherent in using your positions to fundraise for a project that is not aligned with the rest of the stakeholders' stated priorities. And the idea that that project could potentially look like new and improved.
Time. sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brown, thank you. Mr. Pup, Evan Pup?
Hey, thanks for the opportunity for me to come up and speak. I'm Evan Pup. I'm from 808 Greenleaf Circle, Wausau, Wisconsin 50401, and I'm a sophomore at Wausau West this year. My freshman experience was different than any other school year. The atmosphere that I was in was ruined because of having us have to wear masks and be 6 feet apart. The masks negatively impacted my school year physically and academically. I came home almost every day with a headache and twice with a migraine from breathing in my own carbon dioxide for 8 hours. And I've been harassed for not wearing my mask properly, if I'm slipping it down or if I'm eating. Teachers stopping like the whole class just to remind me and other kids just to wear a mask. And I do not wish to see the administration taking it upon themselves or the school board and masking us without the parents' consent and the students' consent. This should be a decision for the parents only. And if you ask me, as a kid from the Wausau School District, I say no. These masks are not the answer, and there are many others that will agree with me. And thank you for your time, and God bless.
Thank you, Evan. Appreciate the time. I'd like to thank everybody that has spoken to us today. Appreciate what you have said. And obviously, I'd like to make a personal comment. We hear that. I hear what you're saying. And thank you. Okay. Public,
You missed someone.
public
I
comment.
signed up, and you didn't call my name.
That was 9 speakers. I think you said there were 10 before.
One did not speak. Ms. Kurth did not speak.
Yes, but I signed up, Lisa Ort Sondergaard. I'm signed up.
Right here.
Yeah, only 8 spoke.
Okay. Lisa?
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for pausing. You
Shy
are
I am
Lisa.
not. My name is Lisa Ort Sondergaard. My address is 220180 Pleasant Drive in Edgar. I come before you as a retired Wausau School District social worker. I understand that students have been adversely affected by the pandemic, by the interruption in their education. I feel for the young man who came up here. I raised a couple kids myself. I understand that one of the most important things that kids get out of school is their social interactions with their peers. I will also say that I think as a whole our society has been impacted socially, economically, emotionally, and physically by this pandemic. So to say we can't ask our kids to wear masks, I just can't understand the reason for that. I was perplexed when I looked at the agenda up here and when I looked at the agenda online that COVID wasn't at the top of your agenda, given what's happening with the Delta variant. I'm not sure. My guess is that it's a political agenda that keeps that from happening, because that seems to be what our country's all about these days, divisiveness. And as much as I think that kids need to be back in school, I think in order to get them in school and keep them in school as safely as possible and with as much in-person learning as possible, I think masks are your best defense. Thank you for reconsidering.
And again, I apologize, Lisa, for.
That's okay.
for-
I have a forgiving spirit.
Thank you. I appreciate that immensely. All right. Item number 4. And I believe that is with our nutrition.
Yes, it is.
There you go.
Okay. Hello, I'm Karen Fox. I'm the Director of School Nutrition for the Wausau School District. You had seen some information about the adult meal pricing in your board book, and I'm just here to see if you have any questions regarding that at all for the school year. All right. Then I just want to provide you with a few updates that might be useful if you're out in the community and you're asked questions by constituents in the community regarding our nutrition service program this school year. We are Under the SSO contract is what you're gonna read a lot about in the paper, and that's the seamless summer option. The seamless summer option is another form of federal funding to provide free school meals for students. So each student that is enrolled in our school district in grades K through 12 have one free breakfast and one free lunch meal for each school day that they are able to obtain. Now, with that being said, we also are under the National School Lunch Program contract for an after-school program, an after-school snack program. So many students that stay after school for a lot of the programming that goes on throughout the district will be able to receive a free snack as well. But that is under a different pot of money from the federal government. So students will be receiving up to 3 small meals a day in the district. So that's a win for the students this year. We do still need to follow the lunch and breakfast meal patterns, and we will use offer versus serve in this manner, where students will receive the required components when they get their breakfast meals in the classroom. The option will be the milk. So we will deliver enough milk to the classrooms or have it available to the students to pick up. That is their choice, but all the other required components, the fruit and the grain that they need for breakfast, will be in that bag delivered to the classrooms. The teachers have opted for breakfast meal in the classrooms this year, so that is what our staff will be doing. There's a couple different service modes that are happening. There's, I think, 2 elementary schools right now that have chosen to allow students to eat in the cafeteria setting at breakfast. The rest will be in the classroom. At lunchtime, the students will be released to come through the cafeteria line and make their meal selection. So it will still be offer versus serve, so they can turn down either the fruit or the vegetable, or I hope they take them both, but that's not always happening. So we will continue to claim and count meals by site as we always have. And we have software that will do that for us. And that is very important at our secondary schools. We had incidents this year, which it's going to happen. It's because of the nature of the beast here. We had students who would take 2 free lunches or 2 free breakfasts. So, it's one of those education on the spot kind of things, just to remind them, hey, it's 1 meal per student, per day for lunch. But with accounting software, we are able to run them through without a charge to get the free reimbursable meal, but also leave that a la carte option open for them. So if they go through the line, come back through the line, it will show that they have already received their reimbursable meal, but that what's on their tray now is a la carte. So we are happy that we're able to offer a la carte again to the secondary students only, middle school and high school, not the elementary. Free and reduced meal applications, we are still being told by the DPI and the government, we need to encourage families to fill those out. So any families that think that they might be on that borderline for income should be encouraged to fill out an online application, and if they don't have access to a computer, please, there's paper applications available at all school sites, and at Open House there's paper applications there as well.
Is that because, is
Yeah.
that because they use these numbers for other things?
That is correct.
And I think we need to make that point to the people that need to sign up for this.
I like that. And that was like the next sentence I was going to say.
Sorry.
And we use the data. The government still doesn't have the optimal method to collect all of that data from the communities to make some decisions about additional fundings for the district. So we obtain additional staffing for buildings or equipment, that type of thing, through some of this free and reduced meal data. So yes, we are encouraging them to do that. I did send a letter to all families on Skyward Messenger. Also, principals received it, so it's at Open House tables as far as letting them know how important it is to fill out that form. So thank you. Yes. All right. Staff openings. Not much unlike all of the restaurants in our area, in our state, in our country. We have openings. So if you know of anybody that would like to apply, please send them to WeCan. I have 11 openings as I speak today. We will be utilizing our 7 nutrition substitutes that we have as we are able to, and the 4 district office staff, including me, will be in a kitchen on day 1 and for probably the first week or so. We continue, today we got 1 more application, so we were happy. We celebrate every time we get an application that comes in. So we continue to interview and go through the applications as we get them. What we have, some of the things that we did need to do is at our secondary schools where we have more of the openings, we did have to combine courts. We still have the same number of menu options available, but we don't have the staff to run 5 food courts at Wausau East anymore. We had to combine them, so you'll come through a line, you might have 1 checker that takes care of 2 food courts. So just, you may notice some of those things if you do go out and partake of lunch, which I encourage you to do. Come out to the elementary schools or the high schools, middle schools to experience the lunch.
Excuse me, just
yes.
because that's a great invitation. Is that
Yeah.
something that this year we're going to open up so that the board can do that periodically?
You're always welcome.
Mhm.
You can come to have a lunch. Just stop at the office, let them know you're coming so you can get a guest meal ticket.
Okay.
We'd love to have you. And what might be interesting, so maybe I'll call on you sometime in October when we have National School Lunch Week. You just kind of opened yourself up to this now. See how I'm short of staff? We're getting some guest meal servers.
May I throw another one out there that maybe the administrators should rotate the time that they are in the cafeteria serving as well, maybe?
Oh.
Just thought I'd suggest that.
Okay, okay. I did not have that in my notes. Okay, menus, our menus should be online at this point. So the district website, you can go through the website under nutrition department. It's NutriSlice that we use for our digital menuing. And students can actually, and parents can download an app, a NutriSlice app, so you can see what that menu is. Many of the parents do that. We receive a lot of phone calls, emails, and I try to respond to all of them promptly because a lot of times it has to do with student preference, allergies, that type of thing, which can be life-threatening. So we try to take care of those immediately. Farm to school. I'm excited this year because I had 2 principals that were interested in receiving grant money, so I did write for 2 grants, and they were awarded at Franklin and Jefferson Elementary. I sent some family notification letters to both of those principals so that they have something to put in their parent newsletters or share at the back to school open houses to let parents know that this is an exciting opportunity for them as well. Their students, I know it sounds corny, but they're going to be learning about broccoli and bananas and kiwi and all kinds of fun fruits and vegetables, maybe local ones as well. So they can go to the grocery store possibly with mom and dad and explore some of that produce area within the grocery store. So it's always a good thing when we're able to get these grant monies into our schools. This year I was also asked by a local organic producer to write a letter for her to see if she could obtain some additional fundings as well. And have heard that that was a success. So we will continue to partner with some of our local organic and non-organic farmers and apple producers, continuing our apple crunch that we hold every year. This year we're starting a garden bar in both of the high schools. So again, that local produce will be filling a lot of those empty slots in that bar. So that is the exciting news from nutrition today. Can I answer any questions for you?
A question or a concern related to Jane's on the free and reduced lunch because it impacts funding and other things as well. What incentive is there for parents to go through that process if the lunches are already free? I'm just it seems to me we're gonna have a huge drop off in our free and reduced lunch numbers, even though we're not going to have a huge drop off in our level of actual real life poverty.
Right, and I think every year that is a big concern. We have struggled with that since I've been in this district, is how do we get to these parents to have them fill that free and reduced form out?
But if it's a concern in a year where the result is they get a free or reduced lunch, it's gonna be
Right,
a much bigger concern in a year where they get the free and reduced lunch anyway.
right, and I think one thing that's gonna be helpful to know too, Lance, is that the pandemic benefit is dependent upon qualification for the free and reduced lunch application. So a lot of those families have been alerted by other resources besides just school districts to be filling out these forms, because this monthly pandemic benefit is you are qualified based on your free and reduced application.
Okay, yeah, I'm just
Okay.
thinking, anything that we can make clear, it's nice to say it would help us if you do this, but that's not nearly as persuasive as these are the tangible results you'll get if you'll complete these applications. I mean, we've gotta be on that.
Yes, okay, that sounds really good, Bob.
Bob can show
This is
them,
Bob's
Bob
fault.
can show them graphs and like
That's right.
take them through some PowerPoints.
Sure. We're working that
Or
tomorrow.
fruits and vegetables, yeah.
Important to point out also that for several years, we've been under community eligibility provisions, so we've had schools where there is no incentive to fill out the free reduced form, and we've been working with principals and working with families and telling them about, if we want funding for our schools, we need you to fill this out. Furthermore, maybe you can say a word or two about direct eligibility,
Yep.
where we don't need everyone eligible for free reduced lunch to fill out a form. We've got some direct cert. And how
Absolutely.
many students and what percentage of all of our free reduced students already are directly certified and don't have to fill out any paperwork? Quite a few.
A lot. So over 3,000.
So most of our free reduced students don't need to fill out a form. They're direct cert because they receive food stamps or they receive some other assistance. So we get direct cert for quite a few families.
Correct. And in fact, we run our direct certification where we connect our student enrolled list with the state every Monday. So we run a list, so everybody that's new, that's qualifying, putting in new applications or qualifying based on Medicare or Medicaid, they are matched and we are sending out letters. So we're over 3,600 even with meeting just by direct certification application.
Okay.
So it's covered a lot by that direct cert. The ones that are the hardest are the families that need it the most, in my opinion. They're the working families whose, the income application. Those are the ones that we really want to be sure that they're filling it out just to check, to make sure, because those are the applications we need to do by online. We check them.
The unfortunate thing is that a lot of times families don't want to sign up for whatever stigma that they might perceive, but now that we have student services in our elementaries, and that are we utilizing our student services to work with our parents and that, because that's a problem too, and I'm hoping that expanding our student services in all of our schools, that's going to help us. I'm seeing a lot of nodding back there, so you don't have to answer. You gave me the answer. Good.
Anything else I can answer for you? Feel free to call, otherwise our number's out there. Happy to talk.
While Karen's sitting up here, as
Yes.
long as I'm here, and I've got the next couple agenda items, I can't say enough about the high-quality work that comes out of the Nutritional Services Department, and Karen in particular and her staff. It is certainly a bright spot of the areas that I oversee, and thank you, Karen,
Thank
and
you.
your staff.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you need a motion for us to
No.
approve those, or is that just
No.
comes
Information.
recommended?
Because they're adult meal prices, we don't have to.
Okay,
And we're hoping we can adjust them back down if we go back to paid status next year, but we'll see. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. You're up.
All right.
You have the next two, if I'm not
The
mistaken.
next 6, I think. The next one, no action is necessary. This is a quarterly report you see from me for legal expenses for each quarter. This one happens to be the last one for 2021, so it's the full year of legal expenses. I think the number down there is around 40,775, significantly under budget this year. And this is something the board several years ago, probably 8-9 years ago, wanted to see quarterly, because they felt it was kind of a litmus test on, how we're doing, with legal help necessary. So it's about half of the budget right now. No action necessary.
Next one.
Ready for the next one?
Yeah.
The next one we do ask you to take action on. It's a list of law firms that we access throughout the year. If we ever did need to add to this list of law firms, we'd probably come to you for that permission. If something unique were to happen and we need to access a different law firm. I will also say that we work with Community Insurance Corp, that's our liability carrier, and oftentimes they hire lawyers on our behalf and they foot the bill, and they aren't necessarily on here. They usually are. They usually align with all of the law firms in the state that kind of specialize in education law, so they usually end up being on the list anyway. But if Community Insurance Corp would want to hire a firm outside of this list and pay the bill, we'd probably do a little vetting to make sure it's a quality law firm, but we'd by all means work with them, and we probably wouldn't come to you for permission. So this one does require action.
And with that, I'm seeking a motion to approve and move forward the attached list of law firms to whom the board and the district shall access for legal services deemed necessary by the superintendent of schools or his or her designee.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.
All right, when Cassie puts up the actual presentation, I'll see if it goes in present mode and this thing works. Worked in rehearsal, but that's been happening a lot lately. Look at that, works. Okay, we've got 4 agenda items, and I want to make a clean break from each one of them so people know what we're doing. The first one, altogether, all 4 of them need you to approve a budget that we present at the annual meeting. We can't just show up at the annual meeting and present the budget. We have to publish it in the newspaper. We have to talk about it in advance. We have to make sure it's available for review. We have to do all of those things before the annual meeting. So what I'm gonna ask you to approve tonight is the budget version that we use for the annual meeting, and then later on, the levy that supports that budget that we're gonna use at the annual meeting. So the first thing we need to do is establish the date, time, and location for that annual meeting. The annual meeting is typically right around the end of September. At the last annual meeting, the voters gave you the authority to set that date, so it's okay that you do that. Otherwise, statutorily, it has to happen sometime in June, I believe. So that's the motion that we're expecting or asking for, September 27th, 6 o'clock in this room.
So with that, I'm seeking a motion to approve and move forward Monday, September 27th, 2021 as the date for the 2021-2022 budget hearing and annual meeting. The meeting will be held at 6 o'clock in the Nicholson Boardroom at the Longfellow Administration Center, beginning with the budget hearing followed by the annual meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you. That's agenda item number 7. Next, agenda item number 8 does not require action. I just want to talk about the anticipated property valuation estimates. We don't learn the official property valuation. When we say property valuation, it's not the property we own. It's the property that everybody else owns in the entire district who pays taxes, okay? We make an estimate on that at this time of year. The state and the Department of Revenue tells us the official number October 15th. We've been pretty accurate lately. We have to make a couple assumptions. One assumption is the city of Wausau. We know how much the city of Wausau property grew or shrunk this year. We just don't know if that growth or contraction happened in the 94% of the city of Wausau that's in our district, because a small part of the city of Wausau is in the DC Everest district. So we make the assumption that the growth in the city of Wausau is uniform. And you'll see that the city of Wausau growth was negative 5.53. And the city of Wausau being $2.8 billion out of the $4.6 billion, it's over half of our property value. Being over half of our property value, you can quickly see how the city of Wausau kind of drives what happens with our property value. And the fact that it's down 5.53 probably makes sense when you see last year it was up 10.47. So there is some volatility. Sometimes growth is happening, more building happening, and complicating it in the city of Wausau. If it happens inside a tax incremental district, that's not property value for us. We don't tax inside the TID. The TID gets taxed, and all the tax revenue goes to support the efforts of the TID, or the tax incremental district. So in the city of Wausau, if you have growth happening inside the tax incremental district, you might see a lower number of property value outside the tax incremental district. I personally sit on the board for all these tax incremental districts. I think the city of Wausau does a phenomenal job of smoothing this out. They actually do a very good job of managing their TIDs, so this doesn't happen as often as you might think. So the growth outside the TID, the growth inside the TID, sometimes experiences some fluctuation. 10.47 growth last year, 5.53% contraction. Last year, our district grew by 9%. Now, it doesn't matter for our budget, the actual dollars that we're able to spend. For city and county government, that does matter. What it does matter for is your mill rate. So the affordability for your taxpayers, it does matter. And if you think about a property value district like the Wausau district, and if you add value, let's say a $1 million company would move into town and set up camp, and your value would increase by $1 million, you could increase your levy and it wouldn't affect anybody else, right? At least in theory. Now, of course, they're complicating issues because there's a lot of things happening, new growth and increased value on existing growth and things like that. But 1.06 is a decrease this year. That's what we're projecting. And we've usually been within about 5 or 10 basis points of that number. So let's think about a 1% decrease in property value. When it's increasing, we always hear from people, if the mill rate stays the same, the levy goes up. And people want to talk about the part that went up, right? The mill rate stayed the same, but the levy went up because a larger property value base to support the larger levy. Well, this year, the opposite is happening in what I'm proposing. I'm proposing the mill rate staying the same, 10.29, and that means the levy is going to go down. And we're able to control that levy almost at will because of the defeasance strategy that we talk about pretty often. You're going to see that in a little while. This does not take action. It's just for your information because it does drive the mill rate. This is another screenshot that you see quite often. On the left, the August 1 estimates will become official October 15th. The Department of Revenue tells us those numbers. The Department of Revenue tells us whatever we tax in this room, the city of Wausau will get about 58.309% of that invoice. So we take our full tax levy and we give the city of Wausau 58.309. Look what last year's numbers were. Last year, the city of Wausau got 61% of our tax invoice. This year, they only get 58%. Might you hear from some people that live in the city of Wausau whose taxes went down? It's possible, because they're getting a much smaller bill from us. In fact, the city of Wausau is getting a bill that'll be about 5.5% less from us. Now, they have their own assessment practices and how they send out tax bills, and that differs from city to municipality, but I would not be surprised if you hear from some people in the city of Wausau that get a smaller tax bill. I said larger. By converse, look at the Village of Maine. Last year, they were 5.5% of our bill. This year, they're 6.07% of our bill. And that's determined by the Department of Revenue, so that's not determined in this room. Department of Revenue determines that. The numbers on the bottom are what is determined in this room. And the general fund has everything to do with the revenue limit. The revenue limit is part aid and part levy, right? Revenue limit is aid that we get from the state and how much we decide to tax. Debt service is mostly referendum authorized debt, and that's that final variable that you have control over, and we can defease as much or as little of it as possible. It's that final lever that we pull to hit the mill rate we want. And then community service, it's the same 662,000 that we had last year. Again, no action is required on this. Skipping to item number, let's see, reading Roman numerals right, 9, I
9.
think, okay, so Roman numeral number 9 does require action. It's the budget, which the budget booklet itself is in board book. We can't go over the whole thing. I'd love to, but you probably don't want me to. So I'm gonna hit some highlights on the budget that we're gonna present at the annual meeting. Some significant assumptions that are worth pointing out from the state biennial budget that was approved. The revenue limit has not gone up, and the per pupil categorical aid has not gone up. Those are the two parts to the bar graph, have not gone up. How did it go up? The voters in our district said to increase our revenue limit by $4 million every year from this year on. So that's the only way it went up. The state biennial budget did not have it going up. So about $500 per student. And there are years where the state biennial budget tells us to increase it by $200 a student. Last year it was $179 a student. Sometimes it's $250. So the voters in our district said increase the revenue limit by $500 per student. Okay? During the next 2 months, some things will be decided. The final district staffing plan is still being developed. When you see this budget in October, the staffing plan will be complete. We'll probably put some placeholders in for some positions we're looking to fill yet, but the staffing plan will be complete. The certified district property value that the Department of Revenue gives us will be complete. State equalized aid is not certain yet. That will become certain October 1st. Third Friday pupil count certification. Doesn't happen until the third Friday in September. We're in a declining enrollment position right now, and oddly enough, more kids loses money for us this year. Okay, but you have to get out of the hole before you can start making that a positive impact. And the Wisconsin Parental Choice Program, which will certainly be a hot topic in the middle of October, when it is revealed, we tax for the Parental Choice Program, but we don't get to spend any of that money. We tax for it, and we transit that money to the DBI, and they distribute it on the Parental Choice Voucher Program. That's not decided until October. So a lot has to be determined yet, but we have to present something at the annual meeting. ESSER. ESSER is a big part of our budget, and I told you 2 weeks ago we'd be seeing something with ESSER, and that is at least our strategy. You perhaps saw this iceberg profile a few weeks ago. The ESSER spending plan supports accelerated learning with curriculum and classroom equipment. Easy to spend ESSER money on because it's one time. Professional development of staff, good ESSER investment because it is also one time. Additional personnel, a little bit tough, but the state legislature has made it pretty clear that we should be using ESSER money to support what normally comes in a state biennial budget. Over and over again, they said, you've got all this ESSER money. We don't have to give you state money. We don't have to increase your revenue limit. So the revenue limit went up none, and largely in response to all the ESSER money that we have available. Difficult for me to support all the personnel spending that we're doing with ESSER. A little bit of confidence that the state is maybe gonna come through with the next biennial budget and fill that cliff. But we really have to have a plan for how that personnel were to go away in 2 years or 3 years. It's actually, counting this year, 3 full years of ESSER spending authority and then a little bit of that 4th year.
And Bob, some of that spending that we've approved recently has been for limited term contracts as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it is staffing, it is personnel, but it's limited term, so
Yes,
that's another way that we've
exactly.
attacked it.
Improvements to buildings and grounds, there is a small amount, the pink, the bottom one is improvements to buildings and grounds. It would stand to reason you'd want to do that as soon as possible. 2021, I do have the ESSER 1 amounts from 2021. There is a small tail on 24, 25. The run out is like October of '24, so you start the school year, you can run out a little bit of spending, but the majority of it should happen early on. If it's truly in response to pandemic preparedness for pandemic, those investments should be made early in that stretch, and that's exactly what we're doing. But it did kind of bail us out with a tough budget cycle that we had this year, having that money available for 3 years. Here's an example of an ESSER sheet that we look at every single day, so it's already out of date. We updated this today. The green ones are the ones that we put in WISE grants. We asked the DPI if they would approve, and they said yes. The ones that aren't green, the bold ones, were approved through the budget reconciliation plan and our personnel that we're gonna use ESSER money to fund. And the non-bold ones were the ones that you approved a couple of weeks ago. 6 special ed pairs and 2 special ed teachers receiving limited term contracts that we're gonna use ESSER funds for as well. So if you add up all the personnel on the bottom, it's about $2 million a year for this year and the next 2 years, and then enacting the plan to not have all that personnel or find an alternative funding method at that point. This sheet is much bigger than this with things that we're considering but haven't been approved yet from DPI, so I felt maybe presumptuous putting it in a slide. Another big part of our budget this year is the referendum, and everybody asks, what are you doing with the $4 million that we authorized? Well, the $4 million that was authorized by the community ended up being a little bit less than $4 million because our revenue limit went down quite a bit before it went back up $4 million. Left a normal action of the revenue limit worksheet and how it behaves with declining enrollment exemption, our revenue limit didn't go up $4 million. It went up probably closer to $2.5 million, but yet we're holding to our promise to the community when they said we're gonna vote in favor of this $4 million referendum for pupil services staff, support for underfunded budgets, and replacement of capital items. We're still doing $4 million worth of all of that stuff. And you see it up here by category. In the blue is the personnel, pupil services staff. The staffing plan isn't quite complete. It will keep getting larger and larger, so it will gobble up more and more and more of that $4 million over the next 5+ years. So we have to build something that's also gonna get simultaneously smaller and smaller and smaller. And the top goldenrod, classroom equipment, technology, and buildings and grounds replacement. $750,000 is just for technology replacement. Most of it, classroom displays. $750,000 is in buildings and grounds equipment replacement. Vehicles, scrubbers, maintenance equipment, things that you just can't afford to do if you have a $1 million budget district-wide for all your capital replacement. $300,000 of it, I put out an invite to all principals, and many of them shared it with their teachers. What kind of classroom equipment do you need replaced? What kind of things that students touch do you need replaced? So that's $300,000 also. The red, immediate operational needs, that's support for underfunded budgets. Pupil services was underfunded for years. We added a little bit. Our at-risk program, underfunded. Alt-high, underfunded. Activities departments with our activities directors at the high schools, underfunded. Fine arts, underfunded. All of them together make up about $240,000, so a pretty small part of it, but much needed support for underfunded budgets.
So right now, with the technology that probably wasn't touched last year except for some of the immediate things that we needed, like cameras and things of that fashion, we're now looking at how we can upgrade so that our teachers have the tools in the classroom so that they can continue to grow in their instruction along with the students in their learning, correct?
Yes, both in investments in professional development and the equipment that they use, and curriculum equipment that they use also.
Good.
Yes. And the golden does end up staying something forever. It's support for a couple of those areas, most notably technology and buildings and grounds. It doesn't stay 750, 750. It goes from 750 down to 600, down to 400. I think the final number is 225 in perpetuity. But we need to get caught up on some of the capital replacements that right now we just can't afford to do. And unfortunately, in the state of Wisconsin, referendums are the means by which you oftentimes do that. And if you remember the discussion from about a year ago, could we fund some of those things with the capital referendum? That ended up failing. And a lot of people are critical of replacing a 4-year-old piece of equipment with a 20-year bond. It's like buying a brand new car and taking out a 10-year loan. People would be critical of that, right? So some of those shorter term capital items are in that goldenrod color. This is the actual budget boiled down to about as small an essence as we can. The revenues are up there, the expenses are up there, there's 2 years comparison. Our change is significant, up 3.93%, up 4.25%. But remember, ESSER is playing a much larger role in this budget, and the $4 million referendum is playing a much larger role in this budget. So it comes as no surprise that both revenue and expenses have gone up. Last year, we ultimately passed the budget that was $800-some thousand deficit. In other words, revenue fell short by $800,000. This one's about $500,000 short. So that would automatically imply you draw from fund balance or you do your best throughout the year to stay under the budget instead of at your budget. Also on the bottom, the revenue limit is mentioned, $2.5 million revenue limit increase. That's the impact of the $4 million referendum. So the voters said yes to the referendum. Maybe some people are expecting that to be $4 million. It's not, it's $2.5 million because the declining enrollment exemption went away and some other exemptions to the revenue limit went away. The state aid did go up a little bit. The state budget did dump some money into the big pot that gets split up with state aid. We tell each other, remind legislators all the time that more state aid doesn't mean necessarily help for us. It just takes away from the levy, so it's taxpayer support, right, or tax relief, so to speak. So the aid number did go up a little bit. So that's the motion that we would entertain, and of course I'll answer any questions that you have.
So let's go with the motion first. This is item 9. I'm seeking a motion to approve and move forward to recommend to the Board of Education a preliminary 2021-2022 general fund budget of $112,804,864 for expenses and $112,260,768 for revenue for presentation at the annual meeting and budget hearing on September 27th, 2021. Any questions for Bob?
Just a comment for anyone who's watching, we've gone over this several times throughout the year, so if anyone's wondering why we don't have a lot of questions, it's because this is our 7th time on it, which is a good thing. I like that. That's much better than having this all come to us at the end.
Which is a very good point,
Yeah.
Mr. Trout, because of the fact that if we were to get hit by this all
Right.
at once, it'd be very overwhelming. So thank you, Bob, for keeping us abreast on that. There are no other questions or comments. All in favor of the motion? Or excuse me, we need to get it. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. So the motion is,
Yeah, we got it first.
I'll second.
all right, we have first and second. We can move on. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. 7-8.
Thank you. We'll publish that on our website. We'll make the booklet available, and we'll publish everything that needs to be published in the newspaper to tell everybody about the September 27th meeting. Next item does also require action, and this is again action to use the levy that supports this budget at the annual meeting on September 27th. Here's just some real quick data that I can't help but sharing because our mill rate has been pretty much flat for a long, long time. And our mill rate is flat, but sometimes our property value goes up, so it supports a little bit larger levy. So I've got the levies up there too in blue. And going back 4 years is when we really started to talk more seriously about defeasance. And that's prepaying some of this referendum debt. We have a whole bunch of referendum debt on the books, as you can imagine, from building East High School and from refinancing the debt and from our 2015 referendum. And statutorily, you can levy as much debt as you have, right? It doesn't have a schedule where you have to levy a certain amount. That's your regular payment. You can prepay. So each of the last 4 years, we've done that. And we've saved millions of dollars doing it. As a matter of fact, on the next slide, I've got the number. But I just want to show you that our target is to keep the mill rate flat, 1029, and in doing that, because our property value is going down, the actual levy will go down. We'll levy less this year than we did last year. And there are so many things that have yet to be determined, and we'll see in October, but because of defeasance, it gives us the flexibility to actually hit that mill rate. It's actually a pleasure for me to go to this meeting and then the annual meeting and then the levy set at the end of October and have the same exact mill rate 3 times in a row. That doesn't always happen. But because of our defeasance efforts, we have some flexibility in how much we want to levy so we can hit that 1029 mill rate right on the nose unless some really, really crazy stuff happens, right? Which I'm not anticipating. Here's just a summary of defeasance. We did it in 2017, 18, 18, 19. We saved $3.4 million of interest payments. Some people think, good, use that on this, use that on this. You can't use it on anything you want. It's in Fund 39, which is used to retire referendum debt. You just have to levy less of it, right? So you levy less of it because you don't have the big interest payments. We've prepaid $30.8 million worth of debt in the last 4 years, and we're supporting doing it again this year with an $11.5 million prepayment to bring our total levy for debt retirement of about $12.05 million. So we don't have a lot of callable debt left. We have enough to do it this year and maybe part of next year. And it fits in real nicely with the referendum and all the discussions that we're going to maybe have in the community over the next several months, that we can support a referendum and still keep taxes flat. The motion and a whole bunch of data. General fund levy did go up a little bit. Remember, we passed a $4 million referendum, right? So it should not come as a surprise that the general fund levy went up. Our debt service levy went down because we're defeasing much less debt this year. Our community service levy stayed the same. Those are the 3 components that make up the levy. Down $489,000. We're levying less. The mill rate's still the recognizable 1029. And the motion is there for you.
Okay. Let's get that motion on the floor and seconded before we comment. I am seeking a motion to approve and move forward to recommend to the Board of Education a projected tax levy of $47,481,497 for presentation at the annual meeting and budget hearing on September 27th, 2021. I hear
So moved.
Second.
second. Any questions at this point in time or comments? All right. If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item.
Hi
You're up.
everyone, good evening. This is our 3-year MOU with the Wausau Police Department, so I'm bringing it to you here tonight to renew it. I'll just draw your attention to a couple of changes that have taken place. And they're not so much changes, but just updating our documents. So if you turn to page A13, there's a letter F, and it just states in there that all officers wear body cameras. So that has been happening for a number of years, but it's never been called out in the MOU. So just an informational piece in there. And then on the very last page, there's a training or a cost sharing to training. It has always been that the district has paid for some SRO training, but it's just never been in our MOU, so we put that in our MOU. And those are the only changes and updates that were made from our previous MOU.
Okay. So the motion I'm seeking is a motion to approve and move forward the school resource officer, SRO, memorandum of understanding, an MOU, as presented.
So
Any
moved.
questions?
Second.
Any questions at this point?
I have several. I saw in there that they talked about wearing body cameras but not having them on.
So what they do is they typically don't have them on, but if they are interviewing somebody or if there's a situation, they will verbally say, I'm turning on my body camera right now.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the other thing was, early on, it talks about, well, in this case, Bliven choosing who these officers will be, but then later on in the document, it talks about a joint effort between the district.
So I think what they're saying is they hire them as officers first, and then we get to help interview them for a SRO position within our district.
Okay. And my stance has always been, I would think we should better spend the money on social workers and school psychologists than on police officers. So, of course, I won't vote no against this, but thank you for clarifying
Sure.
this.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Motion carries 6-2.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at item 12.
Yes. Good evening, board members. Thank you for the opportunity to bring forth our community engagement process and proposal centered around the needs within our buildings, like we talked about at the last meeting. So within this presentation, I've laid out a timeline that takes us through the end of December. It's broken down by month, so we'll start in September. So really the first piece in this process would be a review with our Board of Education. So what we're looking to do is during our next meeting on September 13th is give tours to you guys at Wausau West, John Muir, and Lincoln Elementary. And the goal with these tours is to show you the needs within our schools. Some of those needs might be lighting related. It might be the way that our classrooms are set up and look. You know, some that were maybe from the 60s and then some that are more of a modern look. So to really give you an idea of some of the needs within our buildings. Simultaneously, as we do that, we would also begin building a web page that's dedicated to the needs within our buildings. It would be pretty similar to the web page we had this spring with the referendum. Informational, but of course a big piece of that is photos and videos, as we know that those are powerful tools when we educate the community. We would also begin a social media campaign. That campaign would be very video focused. Those videos tend to get more engagement, and if they get more engagement and they're at least 3 minutes in length, they appear in more timelines. So that also is pretty powerful. Another big piece of this process would be to conduct a survey. So we look to do an online survey that's available in multiple languages, so it would not be a barrier to community members looking to take it. There would also be PDFs available as well, so if somebody doesn't have internet access or maybe doesn't feel comfortable or have the equipment, they also would still be able to take that survey by picking up a PDF. The goal, though, in this survey is to receive input from our staff, of course, our parents, the community, about how they prioritize the district's needs. We'd also let them know that the survey is coming out by mailing a postcard that gives them access. It would be an open survey. There would not be a code required. So anyone with the link and the information, of course, we'd have it on our website and social media, would have access to it as well. That survey would be broken up into 3 sections. That first section would focus on demographics. So are you a staff member? Do you have a child in the Wausau School District? What's your age? Kind of that key information. From there, we'd outline the needs. We'd share some of the needs we have, and we would ask community members, staff, and families to respond to those needs. Something we might ask in there is, of the needs we have, do they need to be responded to now? That's an example. And then lastly, we present solutions. More general, there may be some specific, but to gauge interest and views in the solutions that we present with those. So that would be done in September. As we move to October, again, we continue that web presence and social media campaign. gathering photos and videos. But then we look to hold in-person community and staff engagement sessions. Those would probably be held within our auditorium, similar to the referendum meetings we had in the spring. And then here, we'd like to open this up to discussion to what degree are board members willing to be involved in that process. Some possible levels of involvement, of course, would be attending those meetings, facilitating, and maybe introducing those. So at this point, we'd just like to open it up for discussion on that.
I think we started, or I think we have a start with a pretty good base, because the referendum proposal that we went to referendum with last time was pretty good. I mean, it had really strong board support. I think Haas is the only one that voted against it, but spoke in favor of it, but didn't like the timing of it. And so it seems we have a good base to start from. What would be really interesting to me would be to hear back from the community what parts of that, were causing you to vote. Some people are just going to vote no matter what, so you can't do anything about that. You got your 20% that say it doesn't matter. But to find some parts of that we could take out, that would maybe reduce the cost, that would turn some of those no votes into yes votes, would be a very interesting part of the process for me.
I agree, if you don't mind me cutting in. And this isn't strictly referendum, and this is community engagement. We really want to kind of go back to the very beginning to say, kind of like a listening session. What are people proud of? What are people worried about? What are the hopes and dreams? And it would also potentially inform a referendum project, but it's just a little bit broader based than that as well.
Would we have to, if we had more than 3 board members, would we have to then identify that and everything, so that we're not with a walking quorum? Or how can we, 4 rather, yeah, before. What would we have to do to avoid that problem?
Yeah, we would just pull it, right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. What we were wondering is, would, and you don't have to answer right now, but what role would the board be interested in playing? And maybe some of you are more interested in some roles than others. We're certainly inviting attendance, but if you have an interest in maybe facilitating part of the conversation, or at least introducing, think about it, and we will reach back out to you. But if you have some thoughts right now, we'd be welcome to hear them.
I just had a couple questions. Back to September, I think it's important for us, when we do outreach, to try to tap the the young adults that have graduated, like in the last 5 years, because they see things, students see things that we don't see. And they would have the information, and there would be, they've grown up enough, there isn't going to be anything silly. And the other thing, in October, when we're doing the reach out sessions, it'd be good for those of us with our schools, like elementary and stuff, that we would attend a PTO meeting and explain what we can to them, because sometimes getting to Wausau West is hard for somebody that lives like in the Lincoln School District, but they can walk to Lincoln for the PTO.
Yes, we could definitely incorporate our PTOs into that. Okay, anything else?
Could I back up just for a minute? So in the previous slide, we're proposing to have our next meeting at one of the schools. We just figured we just get you on a bus, right? LA team members would probably go along with you, right? And we would just go from one school to another, and the last school we end up at, we'd host a meeting there. Is that agreeable to the board?
That would be agreeable to me. An alternative would be to have 3 meetings in a row at different locations, which would also work. To start each meeting off with a tour at West, and then the next meeting could be at wherever, and depends on your time frame and how quickly you want to get those in. But if you want to avoid the driving around, we could just have a meeting at one place to start with a tour.
We could do it that way, yes. Yeah.
Either one's fine with me. Just want to throw it out there.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea.
Either way.
If it's time.
Right.
Yeah, if the time isn't a big deal, because that would obviously take us 3 meetings to hit all 3 places then.
Right, yeah. We could do it that way. Hadn't thought about that. We had thought about just kind of doing all 3 in one evening, so you kind of see them.
Either's fine. I don't
Yeah,
want to suggest that
okay,
it
sure.
shouldn't be that way. I just want to throw it out there.
Yeah.
Either's fine with me.
Yeah,
The schools would be relatively close that you would choose.
correct, yeah, the three on here.
Yep. West.
We'd probably go Lincoln, Mere, West, I'm guessing.
Yep. And those
That's
were
fine
all
with me.
my schools that I went to.
Yep.
So, I'm more than happy to help facilitate any of those, but it would depend on how well I know the building myself.
Yeah, and we would have Larry Simon, we'd also have the staff that work in the building, because obviously they know their buildings best. Okay, good, thank you.
Do we need a
We'll make a
motion for
plan.
this, or this is just?
No, we've got one more slide, and then, yeah, why don't you go ahead?
All right. So if we move on to November, we would review the survey results that we received along with any valuable information from our community engagement sessions, those in-person ones with you during a Board of Education meeting. Of course, continue that web and social media presence. And we'd also send out another mailer, whether that be a postcard or a flyer, talking about more in-person community engagement sessions. And we'd look to do those during the month of December. And what would be slightly different is we would like to incorporate our service groups too. And those service groups, Noon Optimist Club, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Clubs, those kinds of organizations would get looped in there as well. And then, of course, following that, we'd again review results from those meetings with the Board of Education. And at that point, too, we just want to point out we'd request a possible decision about an April 2022 referendum. Any other questions?
Just a suggestion, when we're providing information about the needs of the district, it would be good to show off at the same time. We don't want to be like, hey, here's this website to tell you all the reasons not to come to our district because look how terrible this
Right.
building is. So at the same time, we're showing maybe what's lacking in one room. Let's show what's great in one of our modern rooms at the same, use it to show off the district at the same time.
Yeah, if I could
I agree.
respond to that, Lance, I appreciate that suggestion. When I talked to Larry Seiler, that's exactly why we selected these schools, because there are areas that have not been touched in a very long time and other areas that have been improved. And so not only can we see the needs, but we can help the board and others understand the potential, and see some of those upgraded areas.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I don't think we need any action, just wanted to run this by the board, make sure we get a little thumbs up.
Okay.
Good to know?
Mhm.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Hiltz, it's down to you.
Yes, sir. Actually, I just want to introduce this presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to some guests here tonight. A few meetings ago, the school board expressed an interest in some sort of a project that would offer some positive impact for students and staff in the community. If you go to the second slide, Ken, we were drafting. No, back up one. We were drafting this presentation, and we just we're thinking, we just wanted to thank you. This is a pretty generous offer to say, in addition to your job in helping run this district, offering to put in some extra effort to do something positive. So we just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for even considering this effort. Next slide. This is just the slide to remind the board and the community that the board had asked us to do some brainstorming. We brought a few project ideas. The two that had the most interest were that pre-school aged event, and then some athletics. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that we are going to take on that preschool family event kind of outside this process. There's and our first stab at that is at the 47th Annual Children's Fest, which is this coming Saturday. So we're going to have some staff there. The G2M will be there, and so we're going to start there and then kind of build it from there. So that effort will be proceeding. At this time, I would like to invite, I'm not sure if it's our curricular directors, or I think it is, and our principals, if you want to come forward and kind of talk to this. I met with the four ADs and principals and Dr. Rauscher well, we've had this conversation a few times. If you want to come forward and kind of share with the board kind of the vision, the plan, the hope, the dream, and see what we have from there. So yeah, you want to grab a couple more chairs. Maybe introduce yourselves, make sure everybody knows you. Some of you have been around a while.
Yeah. I'll start, I guess.
Is that a hint?
Yeah, I guess it was.
That would be good, Jeb.
I'm still sharp enough to hear the hint. Jeb Steckbar, principal at Wausau West High School. I'm Caleb Bushman, I'm the principal at Wausau East High School.
Brian Miller, Athletic and Activities Director at West.
Kurt Bannon, Oval Activities Director at East.
Thank you. So take it away.
Maybe I'll just start with one thing, being that it was already said that I've been around probably the longest here, but one of the things that I guess it's important for you to know is throughout the ages since I've been around anyway, there's been projects talked about and kind of started. I know there was, for Wes in particular, there was one kind of started in back later 2000s that connect to this facility kind of issue, but the recession hit, and I mean there was a lot of businesses on the west side that were interested in taking a look at things, and so this conversation has happened for quite some time, I think, and it's ebbed and flowed in terms of what's going on probably in the world a little bit. I think a big thing that's happened most recently in the state, and if you have kids who are going to tournaments and things like that, you'll probably see the Fox Valley in our northern area. I guess the Fox Valley was a start where you could tell. I mean, things were kind of upping in terms of just some newness. Where I think for a long time everybody kind of had similar facilities, and then things started changing, probably time. But that also has kind of contributed to some of our thinking, some of the conversations that have come our way from parents and those who are interested in some of the extracurricular activities that we offer as a district. So I don't know if that gives you a little preface to the, and I think you guys can.
Do you want to speak for East first, Gil, or do you want me to keep rambling about West?
Well, one of the things I think we've talked about in facility usage is that we're fortunate that all of our schools are great schools in the area, and especially when you get into the secondary levels, what separates the schools are the additional things that you can offer to the academics. Your bands, your theaters, your athletics, all of those programs are what separates and brings kids an interest into the area.
And so, and this is starting my fourth year here, so in observations of our facilities, in particular how we relate to some of the other schools in our conference, I've done surveys of several WIA districts, schools, either to the west and to the east, districts similar in our size about the comparative facilities that we might have. In particular, it's the turf that is always kind of something that focuses our athletes, because many of them run into it and parents run into it in other districts, and we don't have the same kind of facilities. So we're a little bit behind. And it generated some of the conversation about access to a greater period of outdoor facilities during the school year. Grass and northern climate limits us. We want to be attractive as people consider moving into the Wausau area, and where do our facilities rate in other schools near us? We want to be we want to have as nice of facilities as we can, and so we're in needing of some upgrades at West. Turfing an outdoor facility or having an indoor facility is kind of where this conversation has gone over the last several months, and providing some lighting to the facilities, so that we can obviously play, other than at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We share some facilities, namely Tom Field, and part of the conversation has gone beyond maybe just doing the same thing at East and the same thing at West. And that we are two schools in the same district, but we're two very different schools, and we do have different needs, and we do have some different enrollment sizes, and some of the things that our coaches and advisors at West would like are a little bit different than East. And it led towards some conversation about our indoor training facilities, which could be used by our athletic teams, other co-curricular organizations, and our curricular programs such as PE. So that's kind of where we stopped at this point. And Dr. Hiltz, if you want to pick up that conversation that we had,
Sure,
feel free,
yeah.
and we'll be happy to try to answer some questions.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to speak over my buddy Kurt here, but I will.
Yeah. Anything from East before we kind of,
And I just think to add on top of that, when you're talking about opportunities for kids, what I've ran into as being new here is trying to find opportunities for the lower levels. And when it comes to the lower levels, it's like, well, we got to keep everything pristine for the upper levels, so therefore the lower levels have to end up going to places where they don't get opportunities for, I know for us, there's a very limited space for JV football games, so then it comes to that conversation where, you know, where we're at with losing our varsity season is the interest is being lost too when these kids don't have the opportunity to go into under the lights and things like that. So how do you spark that interest back up and get that spark lit again? I think is really important when it comes to branding and trying to motivate kids to be in these facilities. And I think on top of that, when it comes from a FIAD standpoint on how you look at additional learning that can be had, I mean, you think of the officiating shortages that we have. How can we maximize space and turf to allow more learning to happen in those areas on top of just gameplay? So trying to utilize all aspects, I think, is going to be really, really important when we're talking about that.
so on that line then, so what we have here is, we really kind of consider it a whole vision, and you can kind of see it listed here. I can't see which slide you're on. I think you're on the one with Wausau West. You can kind of see the campus. But again, you know, the training and competition facilities, turfing, outdoor fields, lighting that they've mentioned. Next slide would be, there's our Wausau East campus. And again, the vision kind of continued. You know, we want to be tournament eligible. We want to upgrade the stadiums. But we'd like to improve our fitness facilities and then expand storage. The next slide, just a reminder that 2 years ago, I guess it's 2 years now, I think it's 2019, there was a community survey that tested some potential projects, and this was related to people's willingness to actually increase taxes. That's not what we're talking about here, but I just wanted to note at the bottom, and I can't read it, so at the bottom it says upgrades to athletic facilities, and the bar graph shows that 55% of those responded were in favor of actually raising taxes to upgrade athletic facilities. So there is an interest and support within the community for this kind of project as well. If you go to the next slide, Cassie, then you'll kind of get to why would, you know, what's the why, right? What's the reason that we could use an indoor co-curricular facility? And we chose the word co-curricular specifically for all the reasons you see here. You know, expand, you know, the seasons, expand curriculum, all sorts of opportunities for students. And this was a list generated through our conversations. This photo here, by the way, this happens to be a metal building with a turf floor. If you go to the next slide, Cassie, there's more reasons why that would kind of speak to the benefits it could offer. This is also a metal building, and this one you can kind of see has two different flooring options, kind of a multi-sport and then a turf as well. So as we talked, you know, and we've mentioned there's the variety of different needs between the two campuses, but we said, well, if you go to the next slide, it'll speak a little bit to, okay, if we want to be ready for the future and anything it might bring, we feel that having a facility on a campus really expands opportunities. 60,000 square feet is a good sized building. There are larger, and of course there are smaller. What we would do is, if the board is interested in this project, we could engage staff in the community in terms of what are the needs, and then what would the facility need to offer to meet those needs. And then next slide just gives some examples, right? So this is an air-supported dome. This is what they built up in Rhinelander, and you have some sizes here. Nexus helped us with this data. So they built a 95,000 square foot facility. That one was in that $5 to $7 million range. And just for comparison, the Rhinelander dome is 128,000 square feet. If you go to the next slide, just an example of a metal building, 36,000 square feet at 7 to 8 million, 95,000 square feet, 18 to 20 million. Of course, those buildings last longer. Larry Seiler reminded me that if you have a dome, if it comes up and down, or it wasn't Larry Seiler, someone from Nexus, it's like $20,000 a year to take it down. There's all sorts of interesting, details. And so we just end with the last slide saying, we can get more information. We just wanted to bring something to the board to consider. Did I miss anything? I know you've got lots you could talk about in terms of scheduling and access for kids and intramurals, and I was glad that you four could come tonight, because they have a lot more detailed information than I would have.
Well, I think from a unification standpoint, we talked about like the facilities, how they can differentiate big time on, and how we can use facilities, because the big thing that we came up with is when our facilities aren't being used, that's majority of the school year. So how do we maximize opportunities for kids, and how can we make it beneficial for all sports across the board? So we talked about the different facilities having the different wants and the needs based on their district. So if West has a turf indoor facility, we have an indoor track facility. Talk about maximizing both opportunities, whereas if weather's permitting, you got West and East football practicing indoors, or vice versa, you got the track teams coming over and working together. In that aspect of, hey, we're all one district and we use our facilities to maximize opportunities for kids, I think is a great way of picturing on how you bring that together.
So you're actually proposing not the identical same type of building, but you're actually looking at possibility of differentiation there, so that it can be, one could be more for this, the other could be more for that. So we're just not having duplicity in all of our fields, and also academics. I keep on talking about that as well. So the differentiation is a key I think we need to continue to look at.
That was spawned from the discussion of, do you put up a significant complex where Tom Field resides right now? And by doing that, it makes the facility nice, but you're using it for limited sports, where if you have a facility at both campuses, now you're using that with your classroom teachers, you're using it with your community, you can use it year-round versus just during those sports seasons.
And obviously this would be a potential benefit for the community, whether it's, there's one that Mr. Miller and I are involved in a previous district, and the community uses that all the time just for walking and indoor recreation, but youth sports as well. There's always a need for training facilities. So.
I have a question. So do you envision this then primarily being practice space? Like for instance, the turf facility, if that then acts, football players and soccer or lacrosse or whatever, would practice in there but not necessarily gameplay in there, and then how does that impact, because it doesn't look, at least in these, that there's seating.
So in a perfect setting, Karen, as an athletic director who schedules things, okay?
Right.
One of the really difficult times is when fall weather deteriorates and spring weather hasn't come upon us yet. And the need to get on some kind of a surface is really important, okay? So if you were to give A.D. Miller a perfect scenario, he would have a soccer, football turf field outside and about 60 yards of turf inside connected to his fitness center, so that the PE classes and the sports teams could do their fitness training and have a grass or a turf surface. The hitting nets would come down for softball and baseball. There'd be portable soccer nets to set up. So whenever we could not do what we could do outside, which is northern Wisconsin, we come inside, and those facilities are available. And it joins right with our fitness training that our kids are doing. That's one of the needs at West that we would see. So no, we wouldn't play soccer games in there, but that beautiful outdoor turf field would be where we could play even in the early spring season.
One of the things that we
Sorry,
always have
guys.
to take into account, whether it's later fall or even sometimes early fall, and then of course early spring and sometimes late spring, is our field condition. And you know, Tom Field, like right now, it looks amazing. But you get a week of rain and then have, you know, East and West football play a tough, you know, game on that turf, it tears it up in a hurry. And so what we find is that sometimes there are limits then. Well, don't play that JV game over there. Don't, you know, and if they were near our campus, we would say, you know, maybe PE folks, let's try to stay off those right now, because we have to worry about that, because once that's gone, then it's a tough go for, you know, for using it for the rest of the season. So,
and I piggyback off of that because I just think it shows a good example of the differences between the two schools, where if we had a facility, we would be looking for an indoor track facility, because where we're at right now, we have all hardwood floors in our gymnasium, which is beautiful, but not conducive to training for a track and field season. We also aren't able to offer any type of indoor track meets with other teams in the conference. If we had something that we could do that. And then to expand upon it, we talked about even inviting the community, if there's, you know, and it'll be a pretty busy place, so you hope you can find that, but for the community, where Wes would be able to offer something different, where we could bring the community in to walk around the track for fitness and open it up for those folks as well.
And if you're not familiar, West, we do have a 180-meter track in our field house, and we do hold indoor meets. So that's why we would, a larger indoor track may not be the best thing for us. We would do better with an indoor practice facility that's multi-use for all of our sports.
Yeah, and then he mentioned too, like they're looking for 2 outdoor turf facilities, soccer and football, correct? And because our football field at our place can host both. So we have a track, so our tracks are different widths, to the point where they would need 2 turf facilities outdoor, we would only need 1. And we could play soccer, we could play all the sports just on our own facility there, and then that would allow more opportunity for our indoor facility for like the track and things like that, where they're looking for more of the 2 surfaces outdoor, and then allowing that opportunity inside as well.
Go ahead.
Well, the other thing, I don't know if you're all familiar with truly the amount of use our facilities get. And I think this would only add to that, and it's our community that's using it. I mean, a lot of times our athletic teams are hosting tournaments. Well, that brings in not only our community but others, brings money into our programs. We have youth clinics offered by most of our sport coaches. I mean, and not, you know, obviously our arts end of the building as well is used often by our community. So I think I mean, when we look at it and we see, I mean, because we could be there every weekend, all weekend long, it's hard to get a spot. It's used very hard by our community, and I think that's a positive, you know, for Wausau.
I think we also discussed too, how cool would it be if you see your kids, if it's an indoor fitness facility and you have your kids working behind the desk that are at the school as internships and opportunities for them to be in that type of atmosphere. You see that at colleges all over, those opportunities that work to financial opportunities, but the same thing we can offer for indoor facilities, to have kids working behind the desk, doing punch cards, whatever they need to do to get those opportunities as well.
I would have just one more. Sorry.
You keep getting.
We get excited. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yes, obviously, you know, schools that are putting out these sorts of facilities are attracting,
those sorts of events, potentially revenue generating events. Obviously a soccer club locally here went to DC Everest, and that's hence why they're considering, this sort of a facility. I guess I'm curious if your conversations internally have led to, I guess, kind of the elephant in the room, on consolidation. We heard, several weeks, ago about the disparities in academics at the high school level. We have East with an 8-man football team, and not sounding like there's a lot coming up to support, varsity football program, some of the other things that are going on within our sports. So if we're going to create something, for the future of this district, are you guys talking about what the future looks like? Because I've never liked to do anything kind of, half,
Short term. Short term.
Short term. But if you're gonna do it, let's do it right, and what makes the most sense for looking 5 or 10 years out, and creating a facility, like you said, Brian, that is optimal for coming from the gym to this facility that gets the most amount of sports, and other co-curricular activities capable of utilizing that space, rather than, doing something that is just kind of, we kind of put something out there that was okay. I guess I'd like us, if we're gonna go down this path, to do something that is looking out to the future. So I'm curious if your conversations have led you down some of that elephant in the room. You talked about this. I think I've heard in this community, it seems like something like this tries to get off the ground and then it never does. But I think there's a lot of interest in the community to do something like this, because we have area schools around us that are beating us to the punch. We know students are leaving for some of those reasons, and it's something that we need to consider.
We did broach that subject, and we did talk about it, and one of the things that we discussed is if you do consolidate, do you choose whatever the junior senior level building is and make a very large complex that you're going to house everything in there? But that's a much bigger discussion than for us to handle. And so the idea of in this situation where you have 2 good sized facilities that meet specific needs for the building, in the event that you would consolidate, you now have differing facilities that can serve people differently.
Well, I had the same, my first thing that I wrote down was gonna be, what about one location and build a better facility, sort of for the same reason. I don't know which school you'd pick, but I like the idea of they're not 2 of the same thing. They're different because the different buildings have different needs. So even if someday down the road we had one high school, 2 campuses, or we had 9, 10 one place, 11, 12 the other, they would still serve those buildings. It's not duplicated in a sense that what I was thinking coming into it is. It's always such a big negative when we're trying to raise money for our high schools, is that we have to do everything twice.
Yeah. Maybe that's a catalyst that starts it in the right direction.
Yeah. And if I could, there were two answers to that. I'd agree with everything you're saying. I think part of this community engagement process is we can have that conversation. Let's have the conversation and see where that goes. Secondly, as we thought about these facilities, if it were a 2-campus high school, those co-curricular needs are still going to be existing for a junior high school kind of or a sub-varsity kind of a campus. So it would be preparing us for a future regardless.
I have a question. So I don't know a lot about sports. So my question is, divisions play against other similar divisions, right? Okay. So what division are we in?
Depends on the sport.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just say football, because that's popular.
Well, it depends on the sport.
picked
And
the hard one.
it depends on your enrollment, and it depends on who makes the playoffs in football.
Yeah.
So typically, if you, as a rule of thumb, West is probably Division 1 or 2, somewhere in there, and we're probably Division 3.
Okay. So is it? So I'm kind of thinking like, is like first division? Do they play other first division schools? These first division schools, do they have the same facilities too? Because if their teams are practicing on just grass, and then we have turf, and they come and play with us, and we have turf, and they only play on grass and practice on grass, then how does that work?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Because there is a comparable practice game question between schools that play each other. So let's just use our conference, for example, which includes Marshfield and Rapids and Point. So Marshfield built their complex, they practice and they play on turf. Rapids just opened their brand new one, they're on turf. Everest has got what Everest has. Point play, yeah, they have turf and their conversations about indoor facilities or whatever it might be. Point plays, it uses the city field, okay? So, and Merrill has turf, although we don't play them in football, but we do in soccer, okay? So East and West are the lone grass fields in the conference. So it is a really good question about where do our kids practice? What are our other schools like, and what do they have? And frankly, how attractive does that become to a family based on the facilities that they see within the same conference? I don't know if I'm answering your question, but what I heard was a very good question. What are the facilities like in comparison to the schools that are most like us or around us?
Yeah. So do you guys know if like those players who practice and play on turf, when they come to our district, do they have to have different equipment so they can play on our fields? Because all we have is grass.
Depends on the sport. So, for instance, the turf fields that they put at Marshfield for baseball and softball, you have to have different equipment that you would play at West, where we have natural grass and dirt. So there are some things that are a little bit different. Others are you don't change that much.
Probably shoes. That would be the
Shoes
biggest
would be
change
the-
that they'd have to make.
So the players would have to purchase 2 pairs of shoes, one for turf, one for grass, if they were going to be playing with a team that only had grass, like us.
They do now.
Right. You can't take your spikes from baseball and go to the turf field at Marshfield. They get real mad when you do that.
That's already happening.
Right.
Yeah.
What are the conference or state rules about, I guess use football as an example, of where, tournament and state level games when you get later in the season can be played? Are there any restrictions?
Yeah, there is. That's another good question, because we host a lot. We have the option on all sports to host sectional, and last year we even hosted state level competitions due to COVID. And there are requirements to your facilities. And we host volleyball and basketball because we have great indoor facilities. They won't give us tournament football games or soccer games because
track.
We don't have we would have to have lights to do sectional track. We have to bring in portables if we did get assigned that, and we've done that at West, if I'm not mistaken, before I got there. So Kurt and I can't request to host those events in football and soccer. Was that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's these very popular ideas that run a referendum. That's why I think something like this should be done within a referendum and not on its own.
It cuts both ways, right? Because you have some people that will look at it negatively and say, why are you spending this money on this instead of on education? And if you had time to sit down with them, you could explain that when we're losing students to other districts for athletics, that's costing us money, which hurts the money we have for education, but you don't get to have that conversation with all voters. So, but on the other hand, it creates a yes vote, which I think is what you're getting at. It creates excitement. People get a lot more excited about this than they do about, something in a classroom, unless you're in that actual classroom. So it's a tough call.
How many students are we losing in our district to go to other districts? Or are they just moving from east to west?
I can only tell you anecdotally, but I would be able to give you 3 or 4 that I know personally within the last year or two. But that's just me that I know personally. I don't have any way to extrapolate that out.
Do we have those numbers, Dr. Hill?
I don't know how you know.
Not for a reason. No, people just
go.
go or come, and we get some. For open enrollment, Angie gets a little bit of feedback. A lot of
Not
times
much.
it's work-related, a lot of times it's,
Daycare, it's usually daycare. If we get a
daycare.
reason, it's daycare.
Yeah.
Well, and like, I can't remember who said it before, but we have good schools in our area.
Mhm.
So I don't think it generally is a specific educational reason, because I don't think you pick Everest over East because of some educational thing. I mean, maybe there's something I don't know about. I think it's generally it's something like that, daycare or something, but I think it's a fine art, or it's a specific
Co-curricular.
offering, or it's a sport, or it's something like that.
IB.
Yeah.
Whichever, yeah.
So just to be clear, that the 3 or 4 that you know, Lance, they moved out of the district or schools?
Schools.
Schools, so they went from east to west?
No, they went out of the Wausau School
Oh,
District. for
out of the
athletics.
district, okay,
Yes.
that's what I wanted to clarify. Do you know where they went?
A couple
Do they-
different schools. Yeah,
Okay.
locally. To not have, they didn't move, they just
Open enroll.
have open enrolled out to different schools for sports. Now, that's one person that knows
Mhm.
a few people that did that within the last couple of years. I have no idea what the actual numbers would be, and I don't know how we could figure that out.
Yeah, that'd be a difficult thing to pull. I know several families as well. I know several people that know several other families, so that decision is being made, and having these sorts of facilities to, one, attract students and families into our district, but two, to provide those facilities, not only for the sports, but the co-curricular activities is a huge draw. So, and especially if you do them right, they can become, somewhat revenue generating facilities, which is obviously a help.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong too, one thing maybe that you aren't aware of, when tournament play is happening on turf for some of these sports, in particular soccer, the game on turf is completely different than the game on grass. And so there's a significant advantage to teams who practice and play on turf than to teams who practice and play on grass. I'm assuming you guys would agree with that, because it's a much faster game on turf. And so I think it puts our district always a little bit behind the 8 ball and at a disadvantage when we make it to tournament play, but then are required to play on a surface that we don't regularly practice and play on. So I think that's another piece that, is a disadvantage that I've seen, at least.
I think the
Well,
band
that's-
one is a big one too, because when they march, they're doing the same pattern over and over and over. And tell them that you gotta stop doing that, because we can't play games on it. That's
Right. Super.
where I noticed that was the biggest, to see bands go out and utilize it during the school day.
I think that's a big thing that
Yeah.
needs to be pushed, is the co-curriculars
The band?
with band.
Yeah.
Oh.
Marching band, yep.
I don't remember as a football coach, I didn't want the band on
Yep.
Tom Field because they'd had lines pounded down on. But now with synthetic turf, and you'd be surprised how many small school districts are starting to put synthetic turf in, because you can get on the field faster, even if you don't have a dome, but you can get on the field faster in the spring and stay a little bit later without tearing the field up for the next year, because your growing season in the spring is cut off. And that's the problem with central and northern Wisconsin. And southern Wisconsin, most people, I think they all have synthetic turf. I just had a scrimmage down south, and I won't mention the name, but a very small district had synthetic turf in 2 different fields. So
Yeah, I understand all of that. But I guess my question is, if it's 5 to 7 million for air dome, 7 to 8 million for a metal dome, how are we gonna pay for that?
Well, and another good question, and I will tell you, this is new for me. Typically when I come to a board, we have a need, we have a proposal, we have a budget, we have a solution. And so to be asked by a board, hey, we'd like to, look at some private fundraising, this is new for me. And if this is of interest, I will learn how this works. I haven't to this point. I will find someone else who's done this and find out what the process is. So I don't know.
A lot of the ones that I've seen have been kicked off with a big sponsor or sponsors, and then supplemented with community fundraising after that, like
Mhm.
the big, like you said with Green Tech or something, the big sponsor starts it off and then you fill the rest.
But was that the school board going to them, or was that a community concern coming to the school board?
I don't know.
Many of them, it appears that the school district and the board in conjunction with each other, I think Wisconsin Rapids, Marshfield, some of the DC Everest stuff and Rhinelander have all been fundraising initiatives and efforts that are put out there that, hey, this is our goal community, and yeah, we might have some anchor sponsors that are wanting to be a part of that, and then here's the total amount that we need to achieve this goal, and it might take a year or two to get to that goal. But that's the mission, you know, for that fundraising effort. And I think like you said earlier, you know, yeah, those things are nice to see on a referendum, help create yes votes, but I think if you're able to do some things outside of that and get community involvement, you know, you can demonstrate that we don't always have to go to referendum to get everything that we need. We have very generous people in the community, you know, that want to participate in these things, and if it can be done in Wisconsin Rapids, Marshfield, DC Everest, Rhinelander, and many others, you know, I think, you know, I'm sure you'd be able to reach out to some of those superintendents and administrations and find out, you know, did they have consultation to help them coordinate these efforts, or?
Yeah,
So-
some have foundations, which we have, you know, there's all sorts of pathways to do it.
Okay, so you're talking private fundraising, so this wouldn't be ever on a referendum, is that what you're saying?
Well, that's the proposal right now, so yeah, I think that's the direction the board is interested in, if I understand correctly.
Okay, because I just want it to be known that if this were ever to come down to a referendum, I would be strongly against it. Because I'm looking at this graph right here, property tax increase, and it has the lowest support and the highest opposition when it says upgrades to athletic facilities. I would be against it, absolutely not, if it were to come to a referendum for this athletic upgrade. I mean, I personally don't think that we need it. What we have now, I mean, it's not the best, I guess, you know, if you're talking Division I football, and like competing against other schools, but, you know, we have other issues that come priority. Like, for example, you know, our classrooms, which have 30 kids in one class, 28, 29, 30 kids in one class, that has to be priority first. And, you know, I am all about, you know, doing good things for the community, the board doing good things for the community. But I didn't know that it was gonna come down to $1 million athletic facility. So, you know, if it comes down to a referendum, I would not support it. But if you guys are willing to go out there and privately fundraise for it, all right.
Well, I think that's what we talked about the last time we brought it up. I don't agree with what you just said in the sense that if it was part of a referendum, I would support it because I think it'd be great for the district. But a lot of people do agree with what you just said, which is why we said maybe it would be better to have something like this outside of a referendum so that you don't have that negative connotation of, you know, this part of the referendum isn't being spent on education. It's, even though it is, we just heard a presentation of why it is, but that's hard to get across in a referendum question.
I think Cobb makes some very good points about the fact why people would vote no versus that. That's why I always go back, if you can show the need academically and the fine arts and the marching bands, and like I said, you can pound lines, then you don't have to worry about it, and they can use the facilities as much as everybody else. I think the idea, it would be used more for phy-ed, physical education. If you had a facility at the school, at the campus, on that campus, wherever it is, whatever we decide down the road. But I think you need to sell this with curricular and co-curricular in mind for the community to really get behind it.
It's hard, though, in a referendum to get all that education out, and we try. For example, when the referendum proposal to combine Lincoln and Grant into one school failed, the survey results afterwards, one of the strongest reasons against it was because of increased class sizes. Even though we constantly told everyone it wasn't going to increase class sizes. It's hard to get all that information out to all the people that maybe are paying attention for the first time when they're, you know, voting that week. And so I agree, Gene, I agree with you that it creates excitement, but I also agree with Ka that
Yeah.
there's the negative side to that too. There's some that would say, oh, this isn't education, so this should be private.
And I'm guessing this chart probably was longer, you just cut it off where the negatives were
Right.
still lower than the positives?
Yes. Mhm.
Dr. Hiltz, you might recall, Peter Leatherman came here and presented that survey, and he said he was surprised at how much in favor our community was for sports. It's usually a 55-45 flip the other way.
Mhm.
He said it didn't surprise him that it was low, but many school districts in which he worked,
Yep.
it was flipped the other way.
Yep.
So
Good point, thank you.
support was actually pretty strong.
Mhm.
So would we build these buildings? Would we also AstroTurf Tom Field?
That would be another question. I think as part of the vision, the overall facilities vision,
'Cause
I guess that'd be one of the conversations. We know there's an interest in turfing the fields at the campuses. But I would kind of defer to you on that question.
People have a very emotional attachment
Yeah.
to Tom Field.
And it's beautiful. It was beautiful on Friday when I was over there.
What I would like to see, I'm sorry. What I would like to see is, there's a lot of talk about revenue generating. What I would like to see is how much money are these indoor facilities making, the current ones that are in Marshfield and Rhinelander. How much revenue are they generating? I think that would be a good number to see, a good number to know, an annual number, maybe over a span of 5 to 10 years. How much money are they generating? That's what I would like to see.
For the
Well,
school
there's
district or the
maintenance,
community?
maintenance, heating, cooling.
Are you saying for the school district itself or for the community? I mean,
Maybe for the school district first and for the community second.
I think it's hard, because, if a tournament is hosted and restaurants and hotels get money from it, we don't know that. But the hard one would be student enrollment, because you don't know. Like, you would maybe know if somebody rented the facility out and what they paid to rent the facility,
Mhm.
or, I know there's some places have memberships available for the community to use, a fitness center or whatever it might be. Like, those you'd get numbers on, but you wouldn't be able to pin down what student didn't come here for 12 years of their education because they picked a neighboring district to move into.
Well, I think your scheduling with our school today has a building aspect in that, where it can generate information about when you're renting the facility, and if you had a turfed field and enclosed facility, renting out a full field or a half field. There are schools that have done that where they can then actually tell you how much they make and generate throughout a year, renting it out to maybe other schools who don't have the facility, but then want to come to our facilities that are indoors and then pay the amount of money, whatever. And then you talk about your clubs and your AAU programs that will pay to come in and practice at midnight if they can't get in during the day. But I think your point to get as much information financially, how that can defray the cost down the road.
But this is also, it's not a build it and you're done. You have these ongoing costs that have to find room in the budget to cover it.
Yeah, and I think defray some of the cost is a good description of it. I don't think we should take it on as we think it's gonna be like, it's gonna make more money than what the cost, it's not a private business, it's not gonna make more money than what the cost is, it's not gonna be run like that.
But it's gonna keep interest up in the community and keep interest up in kids coming to those schools, and that way it'll generate revenue on the back end.
Right.
I think that train has left the station when it comes to making a lot of money. That was about 20 years ago, with some of the schools that were putting that up actually did earn money to pay for their dome and then eventually replace it down the line. I don't think that's happening now because there are so many indoor facilities. You can't generate that kind of money anymore. So it would be a defrayment, but not complete.
Right.
I think, from that standpoint of cost analysis, I think getting the cost of what it actually costs to turf Tom Field, all the maintenance that goes into that, the man hours of seeding it, fertilizing it, watering it, is very comparable to when you have the turf field. Now all that maintenance of painting lines, going out there mowing it, all that now is freed up. And really it's more of a cost savings, because now you're putting that money that you would normally put every year into turf to saving to replace it within that 10 to 15 year lifespan, whatever you're going to get out of that turf, and then replacing it fully in that standpoint. So when you look at that, when you're talking about cost analysis, like there isn't a lot of and then now when you take that, now you look at the amount of people that are using that field as to how many people are using the field now. I think is going to be an interesting number on how much it increases when you put that turf on there, along with the cost analysis really doesn't change much. It's now you're taking that money that you're saving from the maintenance and all the seeding and all that, now you're putting it away to save it for that 10 years that now we recash that in on a new turf.
Right.
So
And that
it's kind of-
synthetic turf lasts about 15 years where you're gonna have to start replacing it, so you have to save some money over here in order to pay for it again down the line. But the number of activities that you'd be able to play on that, you could host a great soccer program, whereas years ago you had a 360-meter track that went around there that you couldn't put a soccer field in the middle of it. But now, the way Tom Field is built, you can play soccer games under the lights, and
You got to now add all your youth programs, now you see youth flag football playing out there, and that's your future of, so.
Well, it also levels the playing field for our athletes to make them competitive with the rest of our conference, at least most of the sports, because they all have gone to this type of facility.
Well, I guess my one thing that I'm really worried about is this facility is gonna have a roof now. So not only are we have to take care of the turf, but we have to take care of the roof now too. And just from my experiences on county board, just to replace the roofing on the 2-year UW school, that's like millions of dollars. And then like replacing the roof right now on the public library, that's millions of dollars too. That's like years of planning as well. That was like opposition we got from for years, and so now it's just being replaced. And so that's the one thing that I'm thinking about is just maintenance. We have turf, but on top of the turf we have a roof now too that we have to maintain. So that's the one thing that I'm thinking about too. It's not just the turf that we have to take care of now, it's also we have a roof that we have to take care of because it's indoor.
Sure, and there's heating and electricity, all that, sure, it's another facility to maintain.
Exactly. And it's gonna be a huge facility as well. That's
We
what I'm
have so
thinking.
many to begin with, in all our elementary schools.
well, it sounds like we have a lot of questions
Yeah.
that you can answer down the road, but the conversation is there, and I don't think we need a motion to at least look at things, do we?
No, I think if the board's interested, we can do a bit of a financial and a maintenance look. I hear an interest in that. And we can do a little research on the process. Those are two things. Anything else that the board would like some more information on?
Revenue generation?
Private, yeah.
Right, the financial, yep. I'm sorry?
I'd like to hear some real brainstorming on the co-curricular pieces. What kind of things could we put into this? Because it seems to me that that's a really big element here, is we can get a lot of different things going on in these kinds of a facility that we may not have access or ability to do now, and that the community doesn't have access to. Then it becomes a broader picture and a broader thing for the community.
If we're gonna do, something at both high school campuses that, benefit each one kind of specifically, it should probably keep in mind, obviously, that future look, right, and what we might be doing, so, what is that finite, what is the actual want and need, I guess, in the short term, with the long-term, vision in mind.
That's kind of what I would like to see too, even if it was like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, like what is your sky is the limit? Write that down so we can kind of see, rather than this, well, we'll settle here, but instead it's sort of like, this is what we'd love to see at the end of the day, and this is what phase 1 looks like for, generating all of that, donation and business involvement, and this is what, and we celebrate when we get phase 1 complete, and then, we move to phase 2 and we move to phase 3. It might just have a little bit more excitement for some people that might feel like, man, that just still doesn't even really meet the needs that we were hoping to see if we actually have a plan that, you know, engages all of those dreams that you mentioned or otherwise.
And we might be able to include those future phases potentially in a future referendum, or, I think if you look at the Wisconsin Rapids, website, I believe is the one, they do have actual phases, kinda like what you're talking about. So they kinda had, I believe that's the one that had some phases that they are walking through. Obviously realizing that we can't, you know, get it done right now, even though that's what we'd all probably like to do, so.
Can't use ESSER money, can we?
Not legally.
That's so creative.
No.
Just a one-time cost, Bob.
Just ask.
It's a one-time cost, Bob. They're listening to you. All right, thank you. We will come back with some further information.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
That was item 13 on the agenda today. Item 14 is, I'm seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion goes.
So we'll be in the PVC.